Hollywood's golden age was more than just a period in cinema. It was a phenomenon. Spanning roughly from the 1930s to the early 1960s, it was an era where stars weren't just actors, they were icons. Studios didn't just produce films, they created legends. And at the center of it all were women whose beauty, presence, and charisma defined what the world would come to see as timeless elegance. This wasn't the kind of beauty shaped by trends or filters. It wasn't temporary. It was lasting. It was unforgettable. And even decades later, these women continue to influence how beauty is perceived on screen. Today, we're looking at 10 of the most beautiful actresses of Hollywood's golden age, not just for how they looked, but for the way they carried themselves, the way they lit up the screen, and the way they left a mark that never faded. We begin with Marilyn Monroe, perhaps the most iconic symbol of beauty in Hollywood history. But what made Marilyn truly captivating wasn't just her appearance. It was her presence. There was a softness to her, combined with a vulnerability that made her feel real. On screen, she didn't just perform, she drew you in. Her smile felt genuine, her expressions effortless, and her ability to command attention without force made her unforgettable. Marilyn wasn't just admired, she was felt, and that emotional connection is what made her beauty timeless. What many people often overlook is how carefully she balanced that softness with a deep awareness of her own image. Marilyn understood exactly how the camera saw her, and she used that understanding to create moments that felt spontaneous, but were actually deeply intentional. Even in silence, she could hold the audience's attention, turning a simple glance into something memorable. Off-screen, her presence carried a similar effect. People weren't just drawn to her beauty, they were drawn to the feelings she created around her. There was a sense of intimacy, as if she was connecting with each person individually. That rare ability to combine vulnerability with control is what elevated her beyond just a star. It made her a symbol, and even decades later, that symbol remains just as powerful. Then there's Audrey Hepburn, whose beauty stood in complete contrast to the Hollywood standard of the time. She wasn't defined by glamour or excess. Instead, she embodied grace, elegance, and simplicity. With her delicate features and expressive eyes, Audrey had a presence that felt almost weightless. But beneath that softness was strength. She brought intelligence and depth into every role, making her beauty feel refined rather than overwhelming. Audrey didn't need to dominate a scene. She transformed it quietly, and that subtlety made her unforgettable. What truly set Audrey apart was her ability to make elegance feel natural rather than constructed. She moved with a lightness that never felt rehearsed, spoke with a calm clarity, and carried herself in a way that suggested complete self-awareness without any trace of arrogance. Her beauty was not about drawing attention. It was about holding it effortlessly. Even in moments where she said very little, her expressions conveyed emotion in a way that felt deeply personal. There was also a sense of kindness in her presence, something that extended beyond the screen and into real life. That warmth made her beauty feel approachable, almost comforting. Audrey didn't create distance. She created connection. And that connection is what made her timeless. Elizabeth Taylor represented another kind of beauty, one that was bold, striking, and impossible to ignore. Her violet eyes became legendary, but it was her confidence that truly defined her. Elizabeth carried herself with a level of assurance that made her presence powerful. She didn't just appear on screen, she owned it. Her beauty wasn't passive. It was commanding, and combined with her emotional intensity as an actress, it created a presence that was both captivating and unforgettable. Beyond her physical features, what made Elizabeth stand out was the way she embraced attention rather than avoiding it. She understood her impact and leaned into it, turning every appearance into a statement. Whether in dramatic roles or quieter moments, there was always a sense of control in how she presented herself. Her performances carried a depth that matched her visual presence, making her beauty feel complete rather than superficial. Off-screen, her personality added another dimension, strong, expressive, and unapologetically herself. That combination of visual impact and emotional strength made her one of the most unforgettable figures of the era. Moving into European elegance, we have Sophia Loren. Sophia brought a completely different energy into Hollywood. Her beauty was warm, natural, and deeply expressive. She didn't rely on perfection. She relied on authenticity. There was a richness to her presence, a sense of life behind her expressions that made her feel real. Sophia's beauty wasn't distant, it was inviting. And that emotional accessibility made her stand out in a world often defined by image. What made Sophia even more compelling was her ability to balance strength with vulnerability. She could be commanding in one moment and completely gentle in the next, creating a dynamic presence that felt alive. Her expressions carried emotion that seemed to come from experience rather than performance, giving her roles a sense of realism that few could match. Off-screen, she carried that same authenticity, never trying to fit into a mold, but instead redefining it on her own terms. That independence added depth to her beauty, making it not just something to admire, but something to respect. Then comes Grace Kelly, who represented pure elegance. Grace had a calm, composed beauty that felt almost regal. There was a stillness to her, a quiet confidence that didn't need to prove anything. She moved with precision, spoke with clarity, and carried herself with a natural sophistication that set her apart. Even before becoming a real-life princess, Grace Kelly already had that presence. Her beauty wasn't loud, it was refined, and that refinement made it timeless. What made Grace particularly unique was her ability to remain understated while still being completely captivating. She didn't rely on dramatic gestures or exaggerated emotion. Instead, she used restraint, allowing small details to carry meaning. A slight shift in expression, a controlled movement, a pause. These were the tools she used to create impact. That level of control gave her performances a sense of precision that felt almost effortless. Her beauty, much like her acting, was built on subtlety, and that subtlety made it enduring. Ava Gardner brought something entirely different, a kind of raw, magnetic beauty that felt almost untamed. Ava didn't fit neatly into any category. She was bold, independent, and completely unapologetic. Her presence had an intensity that drew people in instantly. There was emotion behind her eyes, strength in her posture, and a natural confidence that didn't rely on validation. Ava Gardner's beauty wasn't just seen, it was experienced. What made her truly unforgettable was the sense that she wasn't trying to be anything other than herself. That authenticity created a kind of unpredictability that made her presence feel alive. You couldn't fully anticipate her reactions, and that made every moment feel real. Off-screen, that same independence defined her life, adding to the aura that surrounded her. She wasn't shaped by Hollywood. She existed within it on her own terms. And that made her beauty feel genuine rather than constructed. Another unforgettable name is Rita Hayworth, often referred to as the ultimate love goddess of her time. Rita's beauty was classic Hollywood glamour, flowing hair, radiant smile, and a presence that felt larger than life. But beyond the surface, she had a warmth that made her relatable. She wasn't just admired from a distance. She connected with audiences in a way that felt personal. Her performances carried both elegance and emotion, making her beauty feel complete. What made Rita particularly compelling was the contrast between her on-screen persona and her off-screen personality. While she appeared confident and radiant in her roles, there was a softness and vulnerability behind that image that made her feel human. That duality added depth to her beauty, making it more than just visual. It became emotional. She didn't just represent glamour, she represented the complexity behind it. Ingrid Bergman represented a more natural, grounded kind of beauty. She didn't rely on heavy makeup or dramatic styling. Instead, she brought authenticity into every role. Her expressions felt real, her emotions honest. Ingrid's beauty came from within, from the way she conveyed feeling. She made vulnerability look powerful, and that made her presence deeply compelling. What set Ingrid apart was her ability to disappear into her roles without losing her authenticity. She didn't perform beauty. She revealed it through emotion. Her presence felt genuine, as if nothing was forced or exaggerated. That honesty created a connection with audiences that went beyond appearance. It made her unforgettable not just for how she looked, but for how she made people feel. Then there's Vivien Leigh, whose beauty carried both delicacy and intensity. Known for her role in Gone with the Wind, Vivien had a face that seemed almost sculpted, but it was her emotional depth that made her unforgettable. She could shift from softness to intensity in a moment, creating a dynamic presence that held attention. Her beauty wasn't static. It evolved with every expression. What made her particularly fascinating was the contrast between her appearance and her emotional range. While she looked delicate, her performances carried strength and complexity. That contrast created a sense of unpredictability that made her captivating. She wasn't limited by her image. She expanded beyond it, showing that beauty could exist alongside depth and intensity. Finally, we have Gene Tierney, often described as one of the most naturally beautiful women of her time. Jean had a symmetry and softness that felt almost effortless. But what made her stand out was her subtlety. She didn't need dramatic gestures or exaggerated expressions. Her beauty worked in quiet moments, in stillness, in simplicity. And that restraint gave her presence a unique power. What made Jean truly memorable was her ability to convey emotion without overstatement. She trusted the moment, allowing silence to carry meaning. That confidence in simplicity made her performances feel genuine and her beauty feel timeless.